Tonight's story is an old one, a tale whispered by grandmothers to their grandchildren when the wind howls outside and the shadows grow long. It is a story from the heart of the ancient forest, a place of deep magic and deeper truths. Let the sound of my voice be your guide. Allow your body to grow heavy, your mind to grow still. We are leaving the modern world behind with its bright lights and loud noises. We are venturing into the twilight, into a time of superstition and wonder. Close your eyes. Breathe in the scent of wood smoke and pine. And let us begin our journey to the very edge of the world, to the doorstep of the one they call Baba Yaga. In a certain kingdom, in a time long past, there lived a merchant. He had a wife and a single daughter, a good and gentle child named Vasilisa. But the mother fell ill, and when she knew her time was near, she called her daughter to her bedside. From beneath her pillow, she took out a tiny wooden doll. "My child," she whispered, her voice as thin as a thread. "Take this doll. Keep her with you always. Never show her to anyone. If you are ever in trouble or sorrow, give her a little food and a little drink and ask her for advice. She will help you." And with those words, the mother passed away. After a time, the merchant married again, choosing a widow with 2 daughters of her own. This new stepmother was a cruel and bitter woman, and her daughters were just as spiteful. They were jealous of Vasilisa's beauty and gentle spirit, and so they made her life a misery. They gave her all the hardest work to do. She swept the floors, cooked the meals, washed the clothes, and tended the garden, all while her stepsisters sat idle. She endured it all without complaint, and her only comfort was the little doll she kept hidden in her apron pocket. At night, when everyone was asleep, she would give the doll a few crumbs of bread and a sip of water and whisper her sorrows. And the doll would comfort her and even help with her chores while she slept. One late autumn evening, the stepmother put out all the fires in the house, leaving only a single flickering candle. "My eyes are old," she said to her own daughters. "I cannot see to thread this needle." "And our eyes are too sharp," they said. "The candlelight hurts them." Then the stepmother turned to Vasilisa. "There is no more fire in this house," she said, her voice sharp and cold. "You must go into the deep forest to the hut of my old grandmother and ask her for a light. Go now and do not return without it." The stepsisters laughed, for they knew this was no grandmother. It was Baba Yaga, the witch of the woods, who ate people as if they were chickens. Vasilisa's heart grew cold with fear. But she took her little doll from her pocket, gave it a crust of bread, and whispered, "Little doll, what should I do? They are sending me to Baba Yaga." And the doll's little bead eyes seemed to glow. "Do not be afraid," it whispered back in a tiny voice. "Go where you are sent. As long as I am with you, no harm will come to you." So Vasilisa put the doll back in her pocket, bowed to her stepmother, and stepped out of the house into the deep, starless night. Chapter 2: The Path Through the Dark. The forest was a terrifying place. It was a blackness so deep it seemed to swallow the very air. The wind howled through the high branches of the pines, sounding like a mournful song. Every snap of a twig under her feet, every rustle of a dry leaf made her jump. She walked and walked, her thin shawl pulled tightly around her shoulders. The air was cold and smelled of damp earth and decaying leaves. Her path was a barely visible trail of packed earth, winding between the great dark shapes of the trees. Suddenly, a horseman galloped past her. He was dressed all in white, his horse was white, and the horse's harness was white. As he passed, the deep darkness began to fade, and a pale gray dawn lit the sky. She walked all day, and as evening began to fall, another horseman galloped by. He was dressed all in red, his horse was red, and the harness was red. As he passed, the sun rose, bathing the forest in a brief fiery light. Vasilisa continued on, deeper and deeper into the woods. The trees grew so thick that their branches intertwined, blocking out the sky. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl or the mournful cry of an unseen creature. As night fell completely, a third horseman galloped past. He was dressed all in black, his horse was black, and the harness was black. As he passed, the world was plunged back into a darkness deeper than before. Vasilisa was trembling with fear and exhaustion. She did not know how much further she could go. And then, through the trees, she saw a strange flickering light. Chapter 3: The Hut on Chicken Legs. As she drew closer, she came to a clearing, and in the center of the clearing stood a sight that made her stop in her tracks. There was a fence, and it was made not of wood, but of human bones. And atop each post of the fence sat a human skull, and the eye sockets of each skull glowed with an eerie internal fire, illuminating the clearing with a cold, dead light. And in the center of this circle of light stood a hut. It was a strange, crooked little hut, and it stood not on the ground, but on two enormous, scaly chicken legs. It seemed to be alive, turning and shifting slowly in the pale light. Vasilisa stood frozen, her heart pounding. Suddenly, she heard a strange sound in the distance. It was a rhythmic, heavy, grinding sound, growing steadily louder, and the trees of the forest groaned and bent as it approached. A great stone mortar came speeding through the trees, and in it stood Baba Yaga herself. She was a terrifying sight, a woman of bone and iron, with a nose so long it hooked down to her chin. She rode with a great stone pestle and swept away her tracks behind her with a broom made of silver birch. She flew up to the hut and stopped. The hut on its chicken legs turned to face her, creaking and groaning like an old man. Chapter 4: The Witch of the Woods. Baba Yaga stood in her mortar and sniffed the air with her long nose. Her voice was not a scream. It was a low, rasping, and ancient whisper, like the sound of stones grinding together. Foo, fum, I smell a Russian soul. Who is here? Vasilisa, trembling, stepped forward from the shadows and bowed low. "It is I, grandmother," she said, her voice a tiny thread of sound. "My stepmother sent me to you to ask for a light." "I know of your stepmother," Baba Yaga rasped. "Very well, you shall have your fire, but you must work for it first. Stay with me and do as I command. If you do your work well, you shall have your light. If you fail, then I shall eat you for my supper." With that, she commanded the great bolted gate of the bone fence to open. It swung wide with a creak and a groan. Vasilisa followed her inside. The hut was larger inside than it seemed. It was dark and smelled of strange, bitter herbs and something ancient, like dust and secrets. Baba Yaga pointed a long, bony finger at the great stone stove. "Cook me my supper," she commanded. "I am hungry." Vasilisa lit a splinter of wood from the fire in one of the skulls and began to cook the enormous meal that Baba Yaga had brought. When it was ready, the old witch ate enough for 10 strong men, leaving Vasilisa only a small crust of bread. "Now," Baba Yaga rasped, her bead-like eyes fixing on the girl, Tomorrow you will have your tasks. Go to bed now." And with a wave of her hand, she was gone into another room, and the sound of her heavy, snoring breath soon filled the small hut. Chapter 5. The Impossible Tasks. Left alone, Vasilisa took out her little doll. "Little doll," she whispered, "what am I to do? I will never be able to complete her tasks." "Do not fear," the doll whispered back. "The morning is wiser than the evening. Eat your bread and go to sleep." The next morning, Baba Yaga appeared. "Your first task," she rasped, "is to sweep my courtyard until it is perfectly clean. Then you must go to the granary. I have mixed a bushel of wheat with a bushel of dirt. You must separate every single grain from the soil. And finally, you must separate a bushel of poppy seeds from a bushel of dust. All of this must be done by the time I return, or I will eat you." And with that, she flew away in her mortar. Vasilisa looked at the enormous courtyard, and her heart sank. The tasks were impossible, but the doll whispered, "Do not worry, I will help you." And suddenly, unseen hands seemed to appear from the air itself. A broom swept the courtyard with a rhythmic shh, shh, leaving it spotless. In the granary, the air filled with the soft, cascading, rustling sound of millions of tiny grains being sorted. A gentle, whispering wind seemed to blow the dust from the poppy seeds. By midday, all the tasks were done. When Baba Yaga returned, she saw that everything was perfect. She could not find a single thing to complain about, though she tried. "You are a lucky girl," she grumbled. The next day, she gave Vasilisa even harder tasks, but again, with the help of the doll and the mysterious unseen hands, everything was completed perfectly. Chapter 6. The Gift of Fire. On the third night, Baba Yaga seemed almost impressed. "You have done your work well," she rasped. "You may ask me a question for each task you have completed." Vasilisa, remembering her doll's advice, asked only about the things she had seen outside the hut. "Grandmother," she said, "when I was walking here, I saw a horseman in white. Who was he?" "That was my servant, the bright day," Baba Yaga answered. "And the horseman in red?" "That was my servant, the red sun." "And the horseman in black?" "That was my servant, the dark night." Vasilisa was about to ask about the unseen hands that had helped her, but the doll in her pocket trembled, and she fell silent. "Why do you not ask more?" Baba Yaga rasped, her eyes narrowing. "That is enough for me," Vasilisa said. "You yourself have said, grandmother, that to know too much makes one grow old too soon." "You are wise," Baba Yaga said, a strange crackling sound that might have been a laugh escaping her lips. "You are wise not to ask about what goes on inside my hut. Now you have earned your reward. You shall have your fire." She went to the bone fence and took down one of the skulls, its eyes still blazing with an unholy light. She mounted it on a long stick. "Here," she said, handing it to Vasilisa. "Take this to your stepmother. This is the fire she sent you for. Now go." Chapter 7. The Light in the Darkness. Vasilisa took the skull. Its light was cold and did not flicker, and it lit the path before her as bright as day. She ran through the forest, which no longer seemed scary. The trees seemed to bow to her as she passed. By the next evening, she arrived home. When her stepmother and stepsister saw the light approaching, they could not imagine what it was. But when Vasilisa entered the house, the eyes of the skull fixed upon the three cruel women. The fire from its eyes was not a warm, friendly fire. It was a fire of pure truth, a fire that seeks out wickedness. The three women tried to run, to hide, but the light followed them, licking at them like a relentless flame. It burned them until by morning there was nothing left of them but 3 small piles of black ash on the floor. Vasilisa was unharmed. She buried the skull in the garden, and its strange light was never seen again. She locked the house and went to live in the town, and in time, her goodness and beauty brought her great happiness. And so the story ends. It is a reminder that even in the deepest, darkest woods, even in the house of a terrible witch, a kind heart and a little bit of magic can find a light to guide the way home. Now, let the story fade. Let the memory of the cold fire be replaced by the warmth of your own bed, and allow yourself to drift away into a deep and peaceful sleep.